Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu was-salamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa sallam. Welcome to our session 2, and thank you for making time. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the tawfiq to come and pray Salatul Isha and then also come to the session. May Allah accept and bless this. Let's get started. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم الذي خلق سبع سماوات طباقا ما ترى في خلق الرحمن من تفاوت فارجع البصر هل ترى من فطور ثم ارجع البصر كرتين ينقلب إليك البصر خاسئا وهو حسير. He's the one who created 7 heavens, one above the other. You will never see any imperfection in the creation of the most compassionate. So look again. Do you see any flaws? Then look again and again. Your sight will return frustrated and tired, worn out. Okay, so before I share some of my reflections, I'd like to get you guys warmed up and see what do you think when you read from these verses, what comes to your mind. And as a reminder, I'm going to put up the questionnaire that we had about that. Okay, so what comes to your mind when you think about this verse or you reflect on this? Let's see if we can get some comments. All right. Okay, let me get started and then warm you up. So for me, when you look at the verses that talks about the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's a reminder to think about the design and the perfection and the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Many times we see different things in life. When we see things that are directly created by human beings like phones or cars or aircrafts, we appreciate the brand behind it, the companies behind it, right? Or the architects behind the building, for Atif, being an architect nerd or geek, if I were to say that. But however, when we see the creation, the heavens, the skies, the water, the lakes, the oceans, the fountains, the mountains, and so on and so forth, many times we just take it for granted, even as simple as a fruit or a vegetable or meat, right? We just take it for granted. We don't realize that connection that we have with the Creator and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually creating it. Even if you think of a loved one such as a child, who is the creator behind it, right? Or your spouse, who is the one who created him or her? So just something to think about and reflect and give attribution and the hamd and the praises where it's due, to appreciate the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We appreciate, for example, the resolution on our phone cameras, but what about the resolution and the facial recognition system that we have within the human eye and the human brain? So appreciating those things and appreciating that we have access to that because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help us increase in our love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Allah is also pointing out here the perfection in that creation. So here it's talking about sky, but even if you expand it further and you look at the whole solar system, the sun, the distance of Earth from sun, and the whole research behind it, how scientists then talk about the perfection in their design, that even if it was to be tempered with or just have a minor change of a nanometer or a centimeter in terms of distancing and all that, how destructive it would be. So this is one of the things to think about when you look at especially the verses in Quran talking about the creation of Allah, as well as whenever we are out there and we are admiring any creation, any existence of any creation, whether it be directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or even indirect creation like phones and cars and what have you, or even an athlete, right? The performance of an athlete is from a human body and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps them to achieve that level of mastery and that level of perfection, to connect it back to the original creator, the designer, the facilitator, and so on and so forth. Secondly, subhanAllah, from this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using his attribute of Rahmah, Ar-Rahman. He could have used obviously anything, so it kind of reflects on the name and attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is Ar-Rahman, and his mercy. It's from his mercy that he has created these things for us to benefit us. So, and also not to let this creation of Allah and chasing the creation of Allah make us distract ourselves from worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So sometimes we may try to acquire something. We want, for example, love from our family and we start disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or we want comfort for our family and we start disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So some of these things to think about from that perspective. And lastly, if I were to this also reminds me of the people who claim that all this exists, all this perfection exists just out of a big blast, right? And there being no creator, no designer behind it. And how silly and how absurd this is to say something like that. So these are some of the things that come to my mind. About anybody else would like to share anything? So we can have collective intelligence. And also, this is a warm-up and practice for us to regularly read Quran and be able to extract these benefits. And then hopefully in the second part, when we go into Quranic Arabic, so even from our Isha Salah, I don't know if anybody was able to pick up any words that we have already seen. There were a few words that we have already studied that kind of got repeated in today's session. However, there were many key themes that were a good reminder. So imagine, inshallah, when we get to that stage that we are able to understand Arabic directly, then you can benefit, inshallah, more from the Salah. Such as today, we saw several different themes. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addressed, from what I can recall, the theme of oppressors. What will happen to the people that are oppressing Muslims because of their faith? And that how Allah is not unaware of them, and how the final victory will be for the believers, and how Allah will take care and recompense the ones who are oppressing the Muslims because of their faith. There was a theme about tawbah, the importance of tawbah, and how a sincere tawbah can erase any sin. Okay, there was a glad tidings for the believers. What else was there? The attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He can do whatever He wants. Right? And being humble about it and realizing the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also the severity of the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then finally, the mention of the glorious Quran and how powerful it is. So all these were key themes. And then in the second rakah, the themes were about family and how you can have family members that may not be on the right path, and to not take it personally. Some people think about it as a personal embarrassment, but to realize that everyone at the end of the day is responsible for his or her own action, and so on and so forth. Okay, so moving on, verse number 6. وَلِلَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بِرَبِّهِمْ عَذَابُ جَهَنَّمَ وَبِئْسَ الْمَصِيرُ إِذَا أُلْقُوا فِيهَا سَمِعُوا لَهَا شَهِيقًا وَهِيَ تَفُورُ تَكَادُ تَمَيَّزُ مِنَ الْغَيْظِ كُلَّمَا أُلْقِيَ فِيهَا فَوْجٌ سَأَلَهُمْ خَزَنَتُهَا أَلَمْ يَأْتِكُمْ نَذِيرٌ قالوا بلى قد جاءنا نذير فكذبنا وقلنا ما نزل الله من شيء إن أنتم إلا في ضلال كبير وقالوا لو كنا نسمع أو نعقل ما كنا في أصحاب السعير فاعترفوا بذنبهم فسحقا لأصحاب السعير. So the next verses will be talking about the consequences. Life is all about choices. So you have a choice whether to worship Allah, whether to acknowledge the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in your life, whether to acknowledge the sharia, the religion, the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or just to do whatever you feel like doing. Whether it be inspired from your community, your culture, your friends, or whatever you feel like. So for those people, okay, I think, did I miss this one? Okay, so I may have missed this one. Let me read that again as well. وَلَقَدْ زَيَّنَّا السَّمَاءَ الدُّنْيَا بِمَصَابِيحَ وَجَعَلْنَاهَا رُجُومًا لِلشَّيَاطِينِ وَأَعْتَدْنَا لَهُمْ عَذَابَ السَّعِيرِ. So from verse number 5, it's talking about how Allah has made these stars. So hopefully when we get a chance to, not look at our screens and actually look at the nature and look at the stars and the sky and how stars help with so many different things, including, the beauty of it, including being the source of finding direction for travelers when we don't have GPS and whatnot, and how these are some of the things that Allah has put in the creation from His rahmah, from His mercy for us all. And however, they also use, it's also mentioning another phenomena that happens, and that's the concept of the jinns or the shayateen trying to listen in the conversation that's happening up in the heavens among the sky, in the sky among the angels, and try to find what are some of the orders or some of the decrees of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala coming in and that will happen on earth. So they try to, listen in and find out some information, and then they communicate with their counterparts in this world, whether it be the magicians or the psychic readers and so on and so forth. Some of that information, very little of that information may be true, and a lot of that will be false. And people tend to focus on what's true, and they may think that, oh, they know everything. However, that's not true. From what Allah allows them to have, they may have one or few bits of information, if you will. However, they are driven away from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that He doesn't give them all knowledge, and they're driven away by these stars. And Allah has prepared a painful punishment for these people. So something that we can relate to this is not to engage in those type of knowledge or with those type of people who claim to have this type of knowledge. Whether it be reading your horoscopes, right, the stars and the Libras and the Scorpions and reading in the newspaper, or taking it to another extreme, going to some sort of a soothsayer or psychic readings or card readings, and so many different forms of that is something that a Muslim should definitely avoid, and it's something that is highly prohibited and can lead to kufr or be considered an act of kufr depending on how severely people are doing it. So the other verses that are recited now are talking about people who make these choices, either to not have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their as part of their focus, as part of understanding and believing on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and obeying Him and following His orders, to rejecting Him completely or continuing to do major sins and so on and so forth. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that these people who have disbelieved in their Lord, Allah has prepared for them painful punishment, which is the punishment of the hellfire, and that's a very evil destination. So if you look at one of the questions that we had, is to think about what is this verse reminding me to focus on. So typically speaking, we may be focusing on different things in life. It may be, as I said, our family, our children, marriage for some people, promotion, bonus, investment, how is the market doing, what's happening, this and that, so many other things that people are thinking about. But again, this reminds you, well, there's one thing that's also a reality, and that is the hellfire. Am I thinking about that? Are my choices leading me? Are my choices like the choices of people of hellfire? Am I getting close to it? Because shaitan is, especially for people who are believers and practicing, it's not going to be like a 360-degree turn. It will be something that you do step by step, and then you kind of make choices that are the choices of the people of hellfire, and then you start deviating. So something to think about, what are my choices? Are my choices like the people of hellfire or the choices of the people of paradise? And so this is a reminder now. Allah is from His mercy is showing us that, look, this option also exists for us to protect ourselves from this by a few things. One is to first and foremost make dua, right? Whenever you read the mention of hellfire or the people of hellfire, we should ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh Allah, I ask you to protect me from hellfire or the punishment of hellfire, and so on and so forth. And then to seek knowledge to not make choices like the people of hellfire. And now it's describing it into further details that when they are actually thrown into it, they will be hearing His fury and it's roaring, and it's how it's boiling over. So it kind of describes to you that picture, and it helps you remind you that as you are worried about all these things of tomorrow and the next month or the next quarter or the next year, also look forward and make sure that we are not stepping in the direction that can lead to this. It describes it even further, that how it will be bursting with fury and how it will be like, tearing apart, and the dialogue that will happen on that day. And one of the dialogues will be that the people, the guardians of the hellfire, will ask them, like, how come you're ending up here? Did you not get a warner? Because they will be so surprised from that perspective, like, how can you do this to yourself? Didn't you have the knowledge? Didn't you have that information? Like, why did you get here? And then they will say, look, no, they will agree that it's not because of the lack of knowledge. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent us the information, but what did we do? Now here some qualities are being mentioned. So we know that when we see those people, we can remind them not to be like these people and also be not like these people. So what these people did was they denied, they ridiculed. They said, how can it be like how that Allah has sent down this message? You are the ones who are misguided. They ridiculed. So this is something that happens. Many people around us will either explicitly or implicitly ridicule religion, ridicule the believers, do name calling, do different types of things. So first and foremost, for us to protect ourselves, to not get into their propaganda and not be harmed with that. To remember that there will be people who will be doing these name callings, and I don't want to be from that. And the two qualities that they did not have are listening and then reflecting on it, understanding on it. And they said, if we had done this, if we had listened, if we had reflected, if we had thought about it, if we have used our intellect, then we would not be from the people of hellfire. And this is really, really important, right? Because we may be falling, we may have some of these type of traces. Either people are so ignorant that they would like to understand and have knowledge of everything else out there and spend so much time on all the gossips out there, but have no time or no effort focused on understanding religion, understanding who is Allah, what is the deen, and why, and what should we do, and so on and so forth. Or if they do understand, then it's just like passing information. You're just like going from one video to the other, but you're not thinking about it. You're not reasoning that how am I applying it in my life? I have information, but am I just taking information for the purpose of education and entertainment? Or am I actually thinking about it? Okay, so I have this knowledge. Where am I falling short in this? What can I do to fix this? Am I using my intellect? Am I using this reasoning? Am I really disciplining myself and my soul to actually practice that or not? So finally, they will accept that, okay, they were wrong. Because Allah will not wrong anyone. فَاعْتَرَفُوا بِذَنْبِ. They will understand, they will acknowledge their mistakes and their sins and their attitude in this life, and it will be said, so be away with these people, right? So they will be thrown away. They will not be the ones who will actually see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They will not be the one who will benefit from the paradise and so on and so forth, and they will be dealt with and thrown away. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from this situation, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from being the people of the hellfire, protect us from the punishment of the hellfire, and make us from the people who are mentioned in the next verse. Let's do that inshallah. إن الذين يخشون ربهم بالغيب لهم مغفرة وأجر كبير. So this is something you will see many times in Quran. It will give you that the consequences of bad choices, the consequences of the choice of disbelief is this. However, if you want, then there's also another path, an alternative path. And that is the people who actually fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you respect Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you will be conscious about any choice that you make. Whether it be the worship, whether it be the rights of other human beings, what we say from our tongues, how we use our bodies, how we use our time, and so on and so forth. And yes, the test is that it's ghaib, it's unseen. You haven't seen this punishment, you haven't seen the Jannah, you haven't seen the Nar. But how do you utilize the information that you have in the Quran and Sunnah to be conscious about it, to have it in your conscious mind? If you have that, if you try to be from these people, if you try to have your identity like these people, if you think about, are my choices like the people who fear Allah or not? If you have that, then Allah will give you maghfirah. He will forgive you your shortcomings. He will forgive you your sins, and He will give you a massive reward. So that's what we have, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay. So keeping it short and sweet, inshallah, we'll stop here from the verses that we want to do today. There is some tea, so maybe we'll take a minute break. You guys can grab your tea, or there may be snacks as well, and then we'll go and do the vocabulary part of the session, inshallah. So tea is at the back if you want to grab that, and then we'll just take 2 minutes if you want to grab tea or snacks. There's tea there, right? Yeah, but then for the session. And then we'll start the Quranic Arabic session. I'm going to